Hello, comrades, and welcome. My name is William Morrison. I'm your British Marxist-Leninist and anti-imperialist comrade based in Scotland, and today we will be reading part 4 of Muammar al-Gaddafi's 28 point The Green Book. This is the series where I take a video per point, I read out the passage, and I talk about my thoughts, and that's pretty much it. I hope that it's informative, and yeah, let's just jump straight into it. I don't want to waste any of your time. So this is part 4, and today we are talking about class. This is actually a part where me and Muammar al-Gaddafi actually part ways. I disagree with his analysis. Well, I disagree with some of his analysis here, as a Marxist-Leninist who kind of put class primary in most of my analytical work. But anyway, here goes. Jump straight into it. So part 4, class. The political class system is the same as a party, tribal, or sectarian system, since a class dominates society in the same way that a party, tribe, or sect would. Classes, like parties, sects, or tribes, are groups of people within society who share common interests. Common interests arise from the existence of a group of people bound together by blood relationship, belief, culture, locality, or standard of living. Classes, parties, sects, and tribes emerge because blood relationships, social rank, economic interest, standard of living, belief, culture, and locality create a common outlook to achieve a common end. Thus, social structures in the form of classes, parties, tribes, or sects emerge. These eventually develop into political entities directed towards the realization of the goals of that group. In all cases, the people are neither the class, the party, the tribe, nor the sect, for these are no more than a segment of the people and constitute a minority. If a class, a party, a tribe, or a sect dominates a society, then the dominant system becomes a dictatorship. However, a class or a tribal coalition is preferable to a party coalition, since societies originally consisted of tribal communities. One seldom finds a group of people who do not belong to a tribe, and all people belong to a specific class, but no party or parties embrace all of the people, and therefore the party or party coalition represents a minority compared to the masses outside of their membership. Under genuine democracy, there can be no justification for any one class to subdue other classes for its interests. Similarly, no party, tribe, or sect can crush others for their own interest. To allow such actions abandons the logic of democracy and justifies resort to the use of force. Such policies of suppression and are dictatorial because they are not in the interest of the whole society, which consists of more than one class, tribe, or sect, or the members of one party. There is no justification for such actions through the dictatorial argument is that society actually consists of numerous segments, one of which must undertake the liquidation of others in order to remain solely in power. This exercise is not, accordingly, in the interests of the whole society, but rather the interests of a specific class, tribe, sect, party, aimed at the member of the society who does not belong to the party, class, tribe, or sect, which carries out the liquidation. A society torn apart by party feud is similar to one which is torn apart by tribal or sectarian conflicts. A party that is formed in the name of a class inevitably becomes a substitute for that class and continues in the process of spontaneous transformation until it becomes hostile to the class that it replaces. Any class which inherits a society also inherits its characteristics. If the working class, for example, subdues all other classes of a particular society, then it becomes its only heir and forms its material and social base. The heir acquires the traits of those from whom it inherits, though this may not be all evident at all at once. With the passage of time, characteristics of the other eliminated classes will emerge within the ranks of the working class itself. The members of the new society will assume the attitudes and perspectives appropriate to their newly evolved characteristics. Thus, the working class will develop a separate society possessing all of the contradictions of the old society. In the first stage, the material standard and importance of the members become unequal. Thereafter, groups emerge will automatically become classes that are the same as the classes that were eliminated. Thus, the struggle for domination of the society begins again. Each group of people, each fraction, and each new class will all vie to become the instrument of government. Being social in nature, the material basis of any society is changeable. The instrument of government of this material base may be sustained for some time, but it will eventually become obsolete as new material and social standards evolve to form a new material base. Any society which undergoes a class conflict may at one time be a one-class society, but through evolution inevitably becomes a multi-class society. The class that expropriates and acquires the possession of others to maintain power for itself will soon find that, through evolution, it will be itself subject to change, as though it were the society as a whole. In summary, all attempts at unifying the material base of a society in order to solve the problem of government, or at putting an end to the struggle in favour of a party, class, sect, or tribe, have all failed. All endeavours aimed at appeasing the masses through the election of representatives or through parliaments have equally all failed. To continue to such practices would be a waste of time and a mockery of the people. So that is it, comrades. We have just read part 4 of Muammar al-Gaddafi's The Green Book, and it was relating to the problem of class. So first of all, I just want to say that he is quite nihilistic in regards, I think he underestimates the ability of class, and he's quite nihilistic. But let's first think, let's give him some credit. Let's give credit where credit is due. He does actually adopt a lot of Marxist analysis here, and as a Marxist, that pleases me very much, obviously. First of all, that is the wrong section. I apologise. I'm reading the wrong section. So he does understand, he shows understanding for class analysis from a Marxist perspective, in that classes are formed by common social and economic conditions. So, the working class experience almost the same material conditions, and the bourgeoisie, the ruling class, they have their own existence. They have their own material conditions and material base. So, two groups of people, the working class and the ruling class, live in the same country, but live completely different lives and live completely different worlds, actually. And that obviously inevitably causes those two groups to fight amongst themselves. It's a constant struggle. They are in a class antagonism. And Muammar al-Gaddafi rightfully points out that all groups or segments of people have clashes with other groups of people. If it's tribes or sects or classes or anything else, there will be antagonisms in different groups of society. Therefore, it will be a constant struggle for power and a constant struggle for domination. So that is something I give credit to him for. He has actually adopted quite Marxist analysis on why classes are formed in the first place, so tops to that. Also, he mentions the inevitable politicization of classes. He says, I can't find the quote, but he says in the first page that pretty much over time, these classes will become political and political movements. And that's definitely true. Of course, communism as a political movement is the movement of the working class against the wishes of the ruling class. And parties like the Conservatives and the Liberal parties, they represent the middle and upper classes, and they want to keep the status quo. So that's true. Economic and social classes do eventually, over time, become political. That's also something that he's correct on. However, he says that it doesn't matter who is in charge. As long as one segment is in charge of society, then pretty much there's a dictatorship. And I think that's a little bit oversimplified. That's something that we disagree on. I think there's some nuance that isn't being looked at here. We have different kinds of democracy and different kinds of authoritarianism based around the world today. We have the fight for communism and the fight for capitalism. And you have authoritarian capitalist nations, you have democratic communist nations, you have authoritarian communist nations, and you have authoritarian capitalist nations. There's a whole mix match here that isn't really being looked at. And maybe that wasn't such a problem when Gaddafi was writing this book, but it's certainly something that we can see now. China is actually a fairly democratic country. Cuba certainly is. Cuba has probably one of the purest forms of democracy that we have. However, they are socialist So the West would tend to call that an authoritarian country. So there's lots of confusion here and lots of nuance that maybe is being overlooked by Gaddafi here. Again, maybe because this wasn't a problem. But Cuba and China are definitely democratic. Venezuela is definitely democratic. Bolivia, one of a high political person in the USA, when he observed the Bolivian election, said it was probably the best textbook example of a perfect general election. It's one of the purest forms of democracy there. These are all countries with socialist tendencies. So I think to just say that it's, oh, well, whoever's in charge, if it's one group that represents a segment of society, it's a dictatorship, I don't think that's true. Socialist societies tend to be, I hate to use the word, but benevolent dictatorships. They are authoritarian in nature, but it's authoritarian because it controls the markets and forces the markets to act on behalf of the people for public good. It controls the markets to alleviate material conditions and make things better for people. Whereas capitalism, there's also a dictatorship there, but they represent a very small few and immense wealth and power, and they actually use the markets to oppress the people, exploit the people for private personal gains and profits. That's the main difference of market use between socialism and capitalism. So just to say that it's a dictatorship can be true, but there's a reason why they are a dictatorship. Would Gaddafi criticise the DPRK today for being authoritarian or being a dictatorship? Probably, but that wouldn't be fair. The DPRK has to be authoritarian. It has to be a very strong dictatorship in self-defense and to rapidly rebuild the country. Because of the DPRK's authoritarian political structure, they have managed to rebuild 28 out of the 32 cities that were destroyed back in the 1950s due to the war. The war, which was backed by the West, headed by the USA. It killed millions. About 30% of the entire population of the Korean Peninsula was wiped out in a couple of years because of that war. So many bombs are still being found in the DPRK. It killed millions of people. It completely flattened the country by the imperialists. Of course, they're going to want a strong military. Of course, they're going to want a strong and stable leadership. And they have that. And I don't think that should be criticised. So that is something that we part ways on, me and Muammar Gaddafi. I agree with him on 90% of things, but this I just can't see. Sometimes authoritarianism is necessary in self-defense of capitalistic dictatorship. Not all dictatorship is the same. There are authoritarian systems which do act for the best benefit of the people. But I've touched on this issue quite a lot. I'm going to move on. So I guess what this means is that Gaddafi would also be against the idea of a vanguard party from a Marxist-Leninist perspective, and he'd also be against Marxist idea of the dictatorship of the proletariat. Even though the dictatorship of the proletariat would represent the vast majority of people in society, in his idea, it still wouldn't be pure democracy. It still wouldn't be pure representation because there would be some group of people being oppressed, be that the bourgeoisie, the ruling class that used to control the society. He'd be against that. He would be against the oppression and subjugation of the bourgeoisie under a socialist system, and he'd be against the dictatorship of the proletariat. So that's interesting. And that leads me to another criticism of Gaddafi. I think that he has a very idealist view of democracy, and he has a very idealistic view of how society works. I'm sure his heart is in the right place, and he has a very positive outlook on how he wants society. He wants everybody to get together. He wants no class antagonism, no class conflicts, no group conflicts. He just wants everybody as a mass of people to work together. No party or class or any allegiances to any divisive identities. He just wants the mass as a people, as a body, to work together. If everybody just speaks for themselves as an individual, not attached to any party line or doctrine, just what you think as a critical thinker, then democracy can be at its purest form because there's no corruption there. You can corrupt an individual, but it's not on the same level as if you corrupt a government or party or any hegemonic ideology. I just think that's very, very idealistic. There will always be parties. There will always be segments of people in society that are different. From a Marxist perspective, there will always be antagonisms in society. That is something that we cannot change. That is an inevitable, that's an inherent part of human history. Dialectical and historical materialism, there has always been conflict, and it was actually these class conflicts that have pushed history forward. Changed the technological and scientific advances. It's raised millions of people out of poverty. History is always pushing forward. It's always dialectically forcing to push forward. So I just think that, based on my worldview of Marxism, this isn't compatible, and I think it's pretty idealistic. His thing. I think that would be a cool idea, and I'm not criticizing Jeremiah. I think that it was a good political ideology. It was one of the best forms of democracy that we've had in the world. It was better than most Western liberal democracies. I am talking about Jeremiah, the political system of Libya. It was one of the purest forms of democracy, in my opinion. But still, there were still antagonisms in society, and that will always be the case. I guess that's kind of it. I don't want this video to be on for ages. I did have more stuff to say, but I think I've covered everything, and I'm quite satisfied with where I've left things. So big props to Qaddafi. He has adopted a lot of Marxist analysis on class. He understands why classes are formed. He understands why they fight each other. And he also understands the negation of society. So he adopts some Engels points of view too. Back in the 1850s, Engels wrote on how revolutions happen and what happens after the revolution. And he said that the seed of negation is already in the old society, and it's a seed that grows, the seed being the revolutionary movement. And the seed obviously outgrows and becomes the actual thing. So say if in a feudalistic society, you had this seed, which was the capitalist class. And they grew and grew and grew over time, and one day they just took over the old society and formed capitalist epoch of society, a completely different mode of production because of the technological advances. That is what Engels was referring to the negation. So right now, we are the seed in society, the working class. We are the seed, and we are growing and growing and growing, and inevitably, one day, the working class will supersede and negate the bourgeoisie, and we will develop humanity to a new mode of production, which is the socialist epoch of society, which is still yet to happen. This is a dialectical process, and Qaddafi clearly understands this to an extent, but he hasn't fully adopted it. He must not agree with that. He has a different worldview, and in my opinion, it is quite idealistic. But that's kind of it. That's all it is. I just wanted to share a little bit of my thoughts, but you don't have to listen to me. You don't have to listen to you. You don't have to be a communist to watch these videos. You don't have to agree with or listen to a single word I say. If you're just here to read the actual part that Qaddafi say, that's fine too. So that's part 4 done. We've talked about class. Next video will be part 5, which is on the plebiscites. So that should be interesting. So yeah, have a nice rest of your day, comrades, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheerio.